Well, welcome. This is the Cheap Seats Podcast, episode 29. Crazy that we're already at 29. But we are recording this. It's around noon on Thursday, March 28th, opening day of the MLB season. That to the left of me is Connor Olsen, who's graciously joining me for this episode of the Cheap Seats. Connor is a fellow, he's a colleague here at Medill. He's a huge baseball fan. As you could tell, he's from the Pacific Northwest. He is a big Seattle Mariners fan, and he's a big fan of baseball, as I mentioned, knows a lot about it. So I'm going to be leaning it on him very much throughout this entirety of this podcast because we're excited to talk baseball. We're going to give you an MLB season preview. But the floor is yours, Connor. Introduce yourself to the people. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Well, appreciate it. Happy to be here. First off, happy opening day, everyone. This is a big one for baseball fans across the nation. I think it's going to be a fun year. To introduce myself, Connor Olsen, like Dom said, Medill colleague, big baseball guy, played a lot growing up, big Mariners fan, suffered through all the pain and misery that comes with that, and really excited to be on the show today and kind of break down some preview stuff for the season and what's going on, and there's a lot of juicy storylines already, so excited to get into it.
Yeah, we'll get to the biggest headline in the beginning here. I know we'll do that really shortly, but as you've noticed, we are in a dungeon of some sorts that you might have guessed. It is not a dungeon. It is a podcast studio within the Medill space. They've been nice enough to let us commandeer it for about an hour to record this podcast. So we want to try something new out. I guess it's a much more professional setup than the usual just Zoom calls that I use and record and use with this low budget production. So we're taking a step up now at the Cheap Seats. You could hear everything that's happening in this room. So if I hit something, if I flip some pages, you might be able to hear it because these microphones are crazy nice. But just wanted to give you guys an update of where we're at. Let's talk some baseball, Connor, shall we?
Let's talk ball.
So what's going on with Shohei Ohtani?
Yeah, so this is crazy. I don't know. I think this is hilarious. I don't know if you saw it yet, but before we get into it, I got my Sports Illustrated delivery yesterday or 2 days ago, and Shohei was the cover athlete.
Oh.
And the big headline print, they had to have printed it before the story came out, but it was to Shohei, the money doesn't matter. It's about winning. And I was like, ew. Oh, maybe we should have pulled this one back before it went out in the mail.
Maybe the money does matter.
Yeah, maybe the money does matter.
Maybe, a little too much.
Yeah, maybe it's maybe also being right matters a little bit too. So I thought that was funny, just timing and where Sports Illustrated is at.
Damn.
But to get into it, the Shohei Ohtani situation is really shocking on a lot of levels. The story that's being ran with now is that Ippei Mizuhara, his interpreter, who's been his interpreter, I think it's 11 years now, so a long time. And also, worth noting, he is a little bit more than an interpreter to Shohei. He travels with him everywhere. He spends all his free time with him. They're eating together. He's doing everything.
By all accounts, they were best friends as well.
Yeah,
they spent every waking hour together.
Yeah, and they call each other brother and all this stuff. So it's kind of crazy that the official story now is that Ippei stole the money from him. But what's really odd and interesting about all this is that ESPN reported the news and they got into the story and they had a long interview with Ippei where he basically said Shohei knew about this. He sent me the money to cover it. Shohei's not involved, et cetera, et cetera. And then word gets back through to Shohei about what's actually happening well after Ippei said all this on interview with ESPN. And basically the Dodgers, before the story dropped, had a team meeting and explained what was going on. And somehow, even though he was there, this still didn't get to Shohei about what was being said.
Yeah.
And so the initial report comes out, and then Shohei's PR team and agent and a whole kind of ensemble gets together, and then Shohei gets up in his press conference, and the story flips.
Yeah.
Where Shohei says, I didn't know any of this was happening. Like, I've been stolen from. Like, Ippei violated, like, a whole litany list of things. And then once that comes out, people say, wait a minute, that's not what Ippei said.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ippei goes back on the record and says, no, I lied about all that too, actually. Shohei didn't know about any of this, and Shohei's just finding out now that the story's breaking, even though he supposedly knew and sent me the money to cover this.
Yeah.
So that is where a lot of the speculation is coming from, and just kind of the flip-flop, snip-snap of the story that's kind of being told by, originally by ESPN and now by Shohei and his camp. And no one's really sure where to go with it. Like I said, you're seeing a lot of speculation that Ippei's kind of being the fall guy. We don't want to run with the speculation. But there are questions that it raises. Namely, the big one that hasn't been addressed yet is how did Ippei get wire access?
Yeah.
There were $500,000 wires to an illegal bookie.
From Shohei Ohtani's bank account.
Ohtani,
yeah.
like very clearly, like. And if you're familiar with like how wiring funds goes, like
especially funds of that amount,
$500,000 funds or amounts, there's just no possible way that Shohei was not made aware or contacted about this. And if Ippei really was able to do it without Shohei knowing, it means that he has to have like unbelievable access and power of attorney to be able to just like go into Shohei's account, which like they are close, but that seems like a handler more than a transmitter.
Yeah.
Like that seems like excessively far access. And then B, there still would be verification and everything. So Ippei would have had to have like Shohei's phone or some sort of communicative device that he's fronting as Shohei and approving it as Shohei when it obviously isn't. So that's a big question. The other big one that like really is starting to muddy the water on this is that thought to be well-known facts about Ippei are coming out. I believe it was UC Riverside.
Yeah, he said he went to UC Riverside.
Yeah, like it was in the Angels program forever. He graduated, I think, in 2007 from UC Riverside.
Yeah.
All the news breaks, and he becomes like this quote-unquote prominent figure in the story. And UC Riverside comes down and is like, not only do we not have records of Ippei graduating from UC Riverside, we have no records of him even attending a class.
Yeah.
So that apparently was
So
a whole lot.
who is this man?
Yeah,
That's
right.
what
No, he's a ghost.
Yeah.
He's literally a ghost in the machine. So it's like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And then the other side of that kind of concurrently happened is it was thought that he had previously been a interpreter for the Red Sox.
Yeah.
And the Red Sox came out and were like, we also have no records of...
That to me is crazy because like how could he be saying this for this time and literally working in the MLB for another team and for them to not even say anything until this comes up?
Right, exactly. And like I guess that just goes to show like the whole fake it till you make it and like, be confident about it because like no one did their research. And it came up I think in the ESPN report too, like people were starting to wonder like how much background did the Dodgers do on Ippei because like you don't even have to go that deep of a level. Like if you just check the graduation records with UC Davis, you'd be like, oh, there's a red flag. And like everyone knew that Ippei was a package deal with Shohei.
Yeah.
So it just raises so many questions because on one hand, like Ippei clearly has like the ability to be like a complete fraud and like seems to be like good enough at lying to pull off like this kind of heist on Shohei. But at the same time, like the biggest questions that kind of exonerate Shohei from having any knowledge or guilt in this haven't been addressed and haven't been answered. So that's where you're getting a lot of speculation from. I mean, obviously you would hope that the game's biggest star, since probably Barry Bonds, is not involved in this. But I can understand how some people might find it hard to believe when 1 + 1 has not really equaled 2 from the get-go on this story. And it puts the MLB league office in a really tough position. The the joke I've been seeing around a lot is like, oh, surprise, surprise, Pete Rose has been reinstated, is eligible for the Hall of Fame all of a sudden.
Yeah, they might have to tweak the rules a little bit.
We're going to have to revise history a little bit here.
Yeah.
But MLB is now launching an investigation into Ippei. They refuse to call it an investigation into Shohei, but they are kind of sniffing around Shohei a little bit and trying to see what happens. I'd love to be in the camp that believes everything Shohei is saying, but he's making it really hard.
It's it's such a strange story, from all the facts that you laid out, and this mysterious character that I guess that Ippei has turned out to be, or is turning out to be. But it's just, I guess my theory is that, if we're trusting Shohei, and I think the fact that Shohei and his camp, for whatever reason, haven't been super forthright and clear and transparent about everything that's happened. They've come out and they've basically just said the things that you need to say to kind of distance Shohei from what happened, but they're also like, they don't fill in the details of like how he got a hold of the bank account numbers. Any like you said, any of the specifics that people sort of need to make sure that, okay, maybe Shohei really wasn't involved in this. He's totally innocent. He was just a victim of theft, which is what he is saying. The fact that, if I'm trusting Shohei here, what I really think happened is Ippei somehow got Shohei to wire this money to someplace, maybe under the pretenses that it was something else. It wasn't gambling. Maybe he convinced him that it was, family related, medical related. I don't know what it was. That's sort of what I, at this point in time, am believing, that he was misled. He was seriously misled by somebody he trusted and knew and obviously spent every waking hour with. So that seems to me what's really happening. But I think it's just, also the angle of this is like, how is this going to affect Shohei Ohtani going into this season, obviously, that's starting today, and with not having a guy, not even just on the baseball field, just in life, that's been by his side, and obviously by all counts just somebody he trusted so well, and he's already in another country that he's been in for a while, but he's still, I guess, not totally. I was reading some pieces that he's still, for the Dodgers, he still hasn't really had any real media appearances with reporters or anything like that outside of the statement that he gave on Monday regarding the story. So he's still sort of this, I wouldn't say mysterious, but just not super open and available to the media figure, called language barrier, just maybe just he wants to focus on baseball or what have you. It is a unique situation because he doesn't talk to the media all the time.
Yeah, and I think there definitely is a language barrier, but Shohei has been a star for most of his life. Like, he is a megastar in Japan. He was a megastar in Japan for a long time. And, like, I think he knew coming into the United States that he didn't want, like, he knew he was going to be a star, but he didn't want to be that, like, constant media presence and having that be kind of a distraction for him.
Yeah.
So, like, to a degree, like, I think the language barrier is very intentional for him because he doesn't want to give the media a reason to, like, always, like, he wants to make it as hard as possible for the media. One thing I think is really interesting, and if there's anyone who can kind of shake all this off and keep playing baseball, it's Shohei, but I don't think he's ever in Japan, or certainly not in America, been on, like, the really bad, difficult side of the media to deal with. He's kind of always been a darling. Everyone's always loved him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say he's always getting softball questions, but, like, he has essentially walked on water for his entire career. And how is it going to impact him when he's coming off of a UCL reconstruction internal brace? So he's already kind of got that quote-unquote adversity built into this season. It's with a new team with the Dodgers, high expectations. He sure as hell wants to win this year. And how is it going to affect him when every press conference he gets up to is not going to be about, hey, you hit 2 home runs today. Like, how great did that feel? And it's going to be like, hey, what's the update? Did you gamble?
Yeah.
And how is that going to affect him mentally? Because baseball, we know, is such a mental game, and staying locked in and focused for 162 games is extremely difficult. So it's going to be really interesting. Like I said, I don't think it's going to crazy impact him this season, but I do wonder if we see a little bit of a different side of Shohei this year that's like, leave me alone.
Yeah, and certainly I think the Dodgers are invested in him heavily, clearly, and so is Major League Baseball. I mean, it just feels like they're trying to Major League Baseball themselves are trying to distance themselves from this whole situation as much as possible. They haven't really come out and made any sort of statement about, obviously they said that they're sort of have an investigation going or whatever they're calling it. But it took them a while to kind of like weigh into this at all.
It did, and it's very interesting, like written in the rules of the commissioner's bylines or whatever it is, like this Shohei situation very clearly falls into like the discretionary like discipline spot. And if anyone is going to be willing to believe the Shohei is innocent story, it's going to be Major League Baseball.
And Rob Manfred.
And Rob Manfred. Like, he is the golden child of baseball.
Yeah.
And so, like, if there is any story or shred that they can go with that's going to, like, keep Shohei away from this as much as possible, I'm very confident that baseball and MLB will be on his side for that.
Yep, that's probably right. I think just the last point here that I have is I might make a comparison real quick. I don't know if you buy into this much, but I was just thinking about the situation and trying to, I like making cross-sport comparisons and just thinking about two sports, MLB, NBA, that, in the very recent past, they've been sort of dominated by these foreign-born players that are maybe not as warm to the media or just don't have much of a public persona outside of them playing their respective sports. So I think Nikola Jokic is kind of, I obviously, hasn't been tied up in any sort of scandal like this, but it just feels like when you have two of these superstars that maybe aren't accustomed to the U.S. media and just their insatiable, lust for news like this and scandal. And I think Nikola has kind of gradually throughout his career as he's become a bigger star. He's in commercials now. He's, I think, a little more open to talking with the media all the time. I think he talks to the media much more frequently than Shohei has. But I don't know. It just stands out to me that these two different sports are having these big stars that are just more of these, I guess, soft-spoken, just, more low-key stars from across the world.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, I think it's a good comparison. I think you're right. Jokic has warmed up a lot after the years, and you're starting to get like his funnier, like dry personality come out a little bit. What I think is really interesting is that like Jokic wasn't a media guy because like he's not like a bubbly personality or whatever. Like he's not like a star and personality wise, and like it's coming out now more, but like Shohei is not good with the media or quote unquote good with the media because he just simply doesn't want to be. Jokic like didn't really care about it.
Yeah. Seems sort of indifferent to it for sure. Yeah.
But Shohei like actively does not like enjoy being a global superstar.
Yeah. It would seem it. Yeah, definitely from what we've seen from him. Yeah.
Is as private as they come. Like, we didn't learn his dog's name, like, when he's in free agency because of whatever reason it might
I was reading something where, like, when he came out with the news that he was getting married, that he got married, they didn't know. People on the Angels didn't even realize, or the Dodgers didn't even realize he had a girlfriend in the first place. So he is a very, very private individual, which obviously is his right to be that way. But it's
absolutely. Yeah. But it kind of comes back to the point where, like, when the media like finds a story like this that they want all the scandalous information on, like, they are relentless.
Yeah.
And like, how is that going to wear on him this season? Because I promise you, we're going to be at the All-Star break, and some reporter's going to be like, Shohei, any update on Ipe? Like, what's going on there? And he's going to be sitting there like, we're 25 games above 500 and first in the West. Like, that's what you want to talk about. So it's going to be interesting. And then just adjusting to like a new, like, after being so close with Ipe and, again, having him in every aspect of your daily life, like, adjusting to a interpreter that is a stranger to you is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
And what if, this is really crazy, but, like, what if he gets this new interpreter and, like, he's like, oh, this is what you guys have been asking me about, like, the whole time? Like, like, is it going to come out halfway through the season? He's going to be like, yeah, Ipe was just like not.
He's just making stuff up.
He was just making stuff up between me and the media.
I would not be shocked, but that would be an incredible story.
Oh, it'd be an incredible story.
Yeah.
Like, Shohei hasn't really known what's been going on
Yeah.
the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, 50% of it. The possibilities are really endless with this one, and I think that's what makes it such a crazy story, especially when it's like the game's golden boy. So
Yeah.
one to watch for sure.
Yeah, no, but it's a storyline that's been dominating the MLB offseason, for better or for worse. Gotta keep the laptop alive. But it's been I guess captivating people's attention. I guess the MLB is just, I think it's struggled to maybe stay relevant compared to other leagues in the U.S. especially. So maybe it's a good thing that they have something going on. It gets people tuned in. But obviously still an ongoing situation, so we'll find out more. Wanted to start with that because I know it's the kind of the biggest thing happening in baseball. But let's talk some actual baseball. What's happening on the diamond, sir?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, it's gonna be a good 2024 season. I guess we can transition right into the NL West.
Yeah. So we are a West Coast podcast, as people
podcast.
know. We talk about Bay Area sports specifically. Mariners are on the West Coast, so I figured why not tie it in. But we're talking about Dodgers, talking about Shohei Ohtani. And this is probably, the NL West has probably been the most active in the free agent market, in the offseason, building superstar teams. Certainly the Dodgers, we could say, about the other teams. The Arizona Diamondbacks were just in the World Series this last season. So I feel like this is the hot division in baseball where there's just, anything could happen. I think the Dodgers are probably still going to dominate the regular season, but you're going to have, I think, 4 teams that could realistically compete for a spot in the postseason. Sorry, the Rockies. We definitely know the Rockies are going to be in the bottom.
We speak your name. Yes. West Coast podcast. Someone's got to talk about West Coast baseball.
Let's do
it. The wild NL West. So, yeah, the Dodgers are probably going to win, but there's questions. Obviously, the whole Shohei thing throws a big wrinkle into all of it and managing the adversity just as a team and the attention that brings to a clubhouse. But also, I think spring training has revealed 2 big things for the Dodgers, which might hold them back from being this 110-win power team. Again, I still think they're going to win that West.
What are the weaknesses? Let's do it.
But the infield defense and the middle infield specifically is a huge question mark. Max Muncy is a okay at best third baseman. You're going to get the power out of him. You're not going to get the average. But defensively, like I said, middling at best.
Sure.
So the hot corner's weak already.
Yeah, he had 2 errors in that one game against the Padres. Yeah.
Like the questions are popping up, and you're seeing it. Mookie at shortstop will have his adjustment struggles, I guess. But if there's someone on the infield that's playing a real defensive position, Mookie's probably the one you worry about the least.
Sure.
But still, shortstop's not an easy position to play, as athletic as Mookie is, and it's been, I think it was since high school that he's played shortstop.
Yeah.
And to ask him to do that for an entire season.
Yeah, full time. Yeah.
Full time, you're the guy at shortstop, and you let him know 2 weeks before the season starts is a really big ask. And you have to imagine that, he'll probably handle it and still be an above-average shortstop defensively, but there's going to be hiccups there, and it might cost them 1 game or something throughout the season.
Yep.
And then second base is a mess. Gavin Lux was never a great defender to begin with, and then he tore his ACL last year, and he's just starting to come back into it this year. And it has not looked good. It has not looked good at all in spring training. And it makes you wonder what they're going to do there and how they're going to solve that kind of middle infield situation, because it's not like they have a bunch of obvious depth to put up and shore up second base, middle infield defense.
Yeah.
Freddie obviously is going to be Freddie at first. And the offense is obviously going to be fantastic. But the defense, specifically the infield defense, gives me some pause and makes me say, well, they're still going to be good, yes, but maybe they're not going to be this undefeatable giant throughout the season. And then the other question mark I have, especially after the Soul Series, is pitching.
Yeah. I wrote that down too. They have 7 pitchers on the IL too. Feels like they've had that happening the last several years with the Dodgers. There's always injuries, and they have some older players, but even the depth too as well. I mean, they have Glass now as their big acquisition in the offseason, but outside of him and a couple guys in there, hopefully they're getting Walker Buehler back real soon, and they have some guys. But it feels like after that, they're kind of going to be struggling to have guys that can really trot out there all the time.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, they have depth. They've got a bunch of young guys, but they used the young guys last year, and they got bounced in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, you can have some of the best. We saw it with both the Braves and the Dodgers last year. I mean, the Braves did have a better pitching staff, but to go deep in the playoffs, you need good pitching. You can score 10 runs a game in the playoffs, but if your pitchers are giving up 11, you're still going to lose. And they brought in Glass now, which I thought was a great trade, but I don't think he's pitched 180 innings more than once or twice in his career. Like, that's a big concern. You can probably book Tyler Glass now to be on the injured list at some point. And then Yamamoto was the other, Yoshinobu Yamamoto was the other big signing. And make no mistake, he's very good.
Yeah.
Like, he is an extremely talented, like, one of the best in the world pitchers. But
Got a little touched up.
Oh, he got really touched up. He got smoked in Seoul. And that's not to say that he's going to come out and be a bust and it's going to be some albatross horrible contract that they gave to him. But people were taking him as, like, dark horse Cy Young picks. And he was as short as, like, plus 150 to win the NL Rookie of the Year.
Damn.
Yeah, like, people were shooing him in for, like, an ace caliber pitcher.
Yeah.
And he pitches one game and gets shelled.
Yeah. Might be taking a little bit of an adjustment.
There's going to be an adjustment
leagues,
period. And he was leaving balls in the middle of the plate in Seoul, and you just cannot do that when you're facing MLB teams in the regular season when they're doing everything they can to score. So you have Glass now that could go on the injured list at any moment and could be out for the whole year at any moment. You have Yamamoto, who suddenly doesn't look so rock solid. And then after that, it's a lot of young guys and question marks.
Yeah.
So if you run into this situation where now Glass now is hurt, Yamamoto's shaky, you're kind of in the same position you were last year where you've got all these question marks. And, Walker Buehler will be back this year, but, like, that's as big of a question mark as they come.
Yeah.
Like, can you realistically rely on Walker Buehler to be the Walker Buehler he was in, like, 2020, 2019? Like, we're 4 or 5 years later now.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to get out of him. So just kind of up and down the pitching staff. On paper, it could be insanely good. It could also have a lot of question marks and struggles if things go wrong for the Dodgers. Again, when you have the AL MVP last year and you have the second and third place finishers in the NL MVP race last year all on the same team, like, you're gonna be good. So I'm still taking the Dodgers to win the West, but there are question marks, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Dodgers come out a little shaky and it takes time to find their rhythm, and we're looking up at the standings at the end of the year, and the Braves are still the best team in the NL.
Yeah.
But looking at, do you want to get into the rest of that?
Yeah. I was gonna say we can go out to the desert next because I do want to talk about the Arizona Diamondbacks. I do think they deserve some more shine for the run that they had last season, and they got a lot of young, exciting players. But yeah, I will say the Dodgers. I mean, they're waiting on a ton of people to come back from the injured list. I mean, Dustin May too. He's one of those special pitchers that they've been relying on to get healthy again, and it hasn't happened. Blake Trinan, out of the bullpen, and Kershaw, obviously they signed him for another year, and still waiting for him to get healthy and into his groove. And he's proven. I mean, he had a great regular season last year. Just kind of maybe just lost some gas in the playoffs. So they're going to be a little careful about how they construct this pitching staff. Are they going to have to put young guys in for starts that maybe they aren't prepared for? And, again, the regular season, I think they'll be fine, but it'll be interesting to see what their rotation looks like come, the back end of the season and going into the postseason.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there's a very real possibility that it's game one of the NLCS, and they've got Yamamoto going, and then they've got, like, Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone in game 2, and you're in the game 2 and 3, and you're in the same spot as you were last year.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden, all that money is just like,
Gone.
it's if they're not healthy, it doesn't matter. So that's been the Dodgers, I think, curse the last couple of years. I've talked to some friends on this podcast about that before. So I think they're kind of the headliner in baseball right now. But let's get to the Diamondbacks, because I just think that they're a fascinating team. They have a lot of really awesome, exciting players. Corbin Carroll is fantastic. Really great pitching rotation. I mean, talk about some real studs in the starting pitching spots, and they just signed Jordan Montgomery a couple days ago.
Yeah, that was a good sign.
So they seem to be poised to compete again in one of the most competitive divisions in baseball.
Yeah, you would think so. I don't doubt that they'll be competitive in the regular season, but they're also in a really tough division.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, oh, well, they made the World Series last year, and that means that they should compete and make the playoffs again this year. But they snuck into the playoffs last year and kind of went on a miracle run.
Yeah.
And you look at what they did this offseason, and they were one of the most, if not the most active team in free agency, as well as kind of the offseason trade market, which is good. It's good to improve your team. And the Jordan Montgomery deal in the last couple of days was a fantastic deal for them to land. But you look up and down the roster, and it's like there's a lot of mid. Like, there's a lot of guys that I'm like, okay, I see why you did that, but, like, I don't know if it's going to work out for you. Like, Gino Suarez, ex-Mariner now, Mariners legend Gino Suarez, had a bad year last year. And, like, put up a 4-WAR season, but most of that was on defense, and he had a great defensive year. Hopefully he can repeat that for Arizona. But was one of the league leaders in strikeouts. We saw the bat speed drop. We saw the power numbers drop. Now he was playing in one of the worst hitters' parks in baseball, so maybe it comes back in the desert. But there's a non-zero chance that you kind of get nothing out of that bat at third base. Jordan Lawler just went down, I think, yesterday. So he's going to miss a pretty large portion of the season. And I think that was someone that they were relying on to kind of come up and be one of their tandem stars with Corbin Carroll, who, let's not forget, had a lot of, like, serious shoulder problems last year. And you saw the power numbers decline heavily. I think it was, like, post-shoulder injury in the second half. He only hit, like, 7 home runs. And, like, that's a big difference in the pace he was on in the first half versus the second half. So if you've got Corbin Carroll coming out who's supposed to be kind of the leader and the star and the face of the franchise, and he's dealing with potentially chronic shoulder issues along with, like, the usual sophomore quote-unquote slump where the league adjusts to you and you have to figure out a way to adjust back, you're not getting that star power to kind of boon the offense in the team. And there's a non-zero chance that a lot of your big free agent acquisitions, Gino Suarez, they re-signed Gurriel Jr., who's a solid player, but he's not a star by any means. There's a big chance that you're kind of looking up and down the roster and being like, well, there's no one, like, coming up in the big moments and getting the clutch hit. And the offense isn't, like, rolling like we thought it would be.
Sure.
After we went out and signed all these guys. Now, the rotation, I have to give them a lot of credit for. The rotation looks really good. You have Zach Allen at the top, who's going to be a Cy Young contender again this year. Merrill Kelly, who's really developed into an awesome number 2 for them down in Arizona. And then 2 really savvy pickups with Eduardo Rodriguez and kind of capitalizing on the lack of market for Jordan Montgomery. Zach Gallen and half of Merrill Kelly, however, the only ones I see in that rotation that it's like these are guys that, like, you're very confident handing the ball to in August, September, October if you're lucky. Eduardo Rodriguez obviously had a really good year last year. Jordan Montgomery turned into Kurt Schilling in the playoffs. But aside from Zach Gallen and, to a degree, Merrill Kelly, like, a lot of these guys are career mid to high 3 ERA pitchers. And there's a world with the Diamondbacks where you're looking at it and going, well, crap, like, Corbin Carroll isn't, like, a bona fide superstar this year. the acquisitions we brought in free agency aren't like popping, and we're just kind of like okay again.
Yeah.
We're same but different essentially. Yeah. And you're looking at an end of the season scenario where it's like, oh well, 2 or 3 games didn't break our way the way we wanted them to. Paul Sewald on the injured list to start the year.
Yeah, I was just seeing that. Yeah. Because he's a stud. I mean, former Mariner as well. Yeah, so he was a stud for them last postseason.
He was very good for them in the postseason, minus 2 games in the World Series when you count most.
Yeah.
But
we're not going to nitpick.
We're not going to nitpick. We love Paul. But there's a very real scenario where you look at the Diamondbacks at the end of the season, you say, well, 2 or 3 games didn't break their way, and it cost them a playoff.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be tight again in the NL.
It always, it always is, and that's kind of the thing with baseball and why they play 162 is it always comes down to those last couple of days, and it's like, well, if you don't have the Corbin Carroll effect, like I said, Jordan Lawler can't come up and like develop into a star. Where's the maybe Gabriel Moreno takes a big step forward, which I wouldn't be surprised by, but it's like is Christian Walker going to be an all-star caliber first baseman again?
Yeah.
Like, that's a question mark.
I think they're relying on the development of those players, the continued development of those players, the continued elevation, And
I can understand assembling, like, a core of, like, solid veterans around him, but, like, a lot of those solid veterans have their own question marks and could be on the downside rather than, sustaining a peak or at the top of their game. So I like the Diamondbacks a lot, but there's a lot of question marks that worry me when you kind of look at the possible outcomes this season. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think I think they made a lot of the right moves that they needed to make this offseason.
They were the right moves.
And they're definitely, I think they demonstrated they still want to be all in with this core group of guys, and I think they're hoping to extend that because a lot of them are young and they want to keep it going. So I think there will be another fascinating team to watch in this division. And then you got the Padres and the Giants, and I don't want to rope them together, but I feel like they're sort of in similar boats. Obviously, the Giants took Bob Melvin from the San Diego Padres this offseason. They've made the big splashes, I think, just recently in the last couple of weeks, signing Matt Chapman, signing Blake Snell, who was a Padre last year. So it feels like both these teams are still trying to compete. Feels like the Giants have made more of those moves, but the Padres did sign Dylan Cease from the White Sox this offseason. So they're both kind of gearing up, but they do, again, they have a crowded division to compete in. They have the Dodgers to compete with. So I think at least right now, it feels like the Padres have more of that offensive flair there with Machado, with Tatis still, but maybe the Giants have the upper hand more in the pitching rotation with Logan Webb and Snell at the top of that rotation. What do you think?
Yeah, to a degree. I think I'm a lot more down on the Giants than a lot of other people are. I think, and we've seen it the last couple of years where the Giants have been searching for their star, and they've been like begging someone essentially to take their money, and no one will do it. And they kind of fell into a good position this offseason where no one wanted to pay Scott Boris's pretty ludicrous prices that he was putting out there.
Or at least for long contracts. Because it was, a lot of 1-2 year deals with opt-outs and stuff, but it not the ridiculous long 10-year deals that people have been signing.
And I think Boris's big flaw this season with doing that was, like, in the past he's been doing it with bona fide stars, like the best in the game, and he wasn't really working with the same ammunition in terms of, like, player talent this year, which I think is what ultimately kind of turned his strategy on himself.
Yeah, I think the Snell one was surprising to me because didn't he just win the Cy Young, the NL Cy Young? And I know he's older and there were some questions about him, but it feels like he's pitching at the top of his game. So that was the one contract that made it surprise me that it wasn't a super long-term deal.
Which I kind of get from fans, but, like, it's also, like, you have to look at it from an MLB executive's view. So you've got a guy that's older, obviously, and he's asking for a huge long-term contract.
Yeah.
And when you're deciding if you're willing to give a guy a high $200 million, 10-plus year deal, you have to say, how reliable is it that we are going to get the best, that we're going to get as much of our money's worth for this as we possibly can? And you look at Blake Snell, and every single tool that MLB executives are using to evaluate a player scream no on Blake Snell. I mean, the strikeouts obviously are there, but he walks more people than anyone in the league. He doesn't go late into games. And essentially he's primed for things to go wrong at any given moment. And are you really willing to spend $280 million in 10, 12 years on a guy that in any given season could lose the stuff and suddenly is a whip machine and kind of going and getting him blown up, and now you're stuck with this contract and a guy nobody wants?
So you're saying the Giants made a smart move, that keeping it kind of to a low commitment in terms of the time.
And, like, I think that's all he was going to get after a certain point. So, like, it's smart to pounce once that becomes available. But even going into this year, like, his profile is as volatile as they come.
Sure. Okay.
Like, and then on top of that, he is notoriously, like, a anti-analytics guy. So if a team comes in and is like, here are the numbers that we think show that you need to make this adjustment, he's probably going to say no. And he's going to look at them and say, I'm a 2-time Cy Young winner. I had the ERA title last year. Like, I don't need to change anything. And it's like, well, this is a great coworker to, like, have in the office every day.
It's a wonder he survived in the Rays for so long. You know,
no, it really is.
It was as heavy as it comes in analytics.
Yeah, they're as analytically driven as it comes. And I think you saw kind of the explosion of that when he got pulled in the World Series.
2020, yep.
But yeah, the Giants, I'm really unsure about, because they've got a lot of guys on their roster where it's like, okay, you can see development and improvement coming out of this, but like, there's also so many question marks. Logan Webb is a rock. You trust Logan Webb. Blake Snell, I kind of went over. Like, it's probably more likely that Blake Snell is a 3.8 ERA, 2.3 whip guy this year than it is he is a repeat of last year.
Yeah, sure.
Or anything close to what he was last year. So I'm a little unsure about that spot. And then, I mean, you look at the rest of their rotation, and it's more question marks. And most of their roster is question marks. So you have Logan Webb and Blake Snell at the top, which is a great 1-2 combo. I'm not saying it's not. But I have doubts and question marks about Blake Snell. And then you're looking at Jordan Hicks, who has tried to be – I think he was in Toronto. They tried to make him as a starter. And it didn't work. Yeah. So is that going to work? Like, that could blow up in your face.
He's looked good in spring training, I think, this far.
Yeah. But, like, that could blow up in your face at any moment. And now you move him back into the bullpen, and it's like, well, shoot, now we have this hole in our rotation. And then it's the rookie Kyle Harrison and Keaton Wynn.
Yeah.
Granted, Alex Cobb is on the IL-15, so he'll be back.
He has been good in stretches. I think he did struggle toward the back end of last season.
He's been good in stretches, but it's like, you're in the NL West.
Yeah.
This is not going to get you across the line. And then Robbie Ray, obviously, who's coming back from Tommy John. Maybe they get him back in July or August. But you don't know what you're going to get out of a guy coming off Tommy John. So it's like, you've got 1.5 guys that I really trust and believe in this rotation, and a whole lot of guys that I doubt more than I believe in filling it out. The bullpen I like. They got the Rogers twins and Doval. And if Jordan Hicks doesn't work out, they can boost the bullpen, putting him in there. So the bullpen's probably a strength for them. But you look at their other acquisitions, like Tom Murphy, another Mariners guy. Love him to death, but he's perennially hurt. And, like, he's going to be the backup, but that means at some point when he gets hurt, you're going back to Joey Bart or Blake Sable, which...
They've had issues with
They've had issues with them in the past, and, like, do you really want Lamont Wade Jr. as your everyday, like, starting first baseman and expect to get, like, a ton of power and stuff out of him?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think their offense has obviously a ton of holes that they're hoping, you know, Chapman and Junko Lee, like, you know, fill those holes to a greater extent. But I still think they're not just going to all of a sudden be this powerhouse offensive team that all out of nowhere that they're just going to become that. But.
And Chapman especially, like, Chapman gets a lot of credit from his time with the A's. Like, he's still an above-average defender at third, but he's not the defensive wizard he was at third. And his bat is almost league average. Yeah. Like, he's a 110 WRC plus guy. And, like, he had a blistering start to the year last year and then sucked for, like, 4 out of the 6 months of the year.
Yeah, he wasn't great in Toronto last year. No.
They're kind of signing him and hoping that he can be, like, one of their stars. And it's like, at this point in his career, as much as we all like Matt Chapman, like, he is not going to be, like, one of your core offensive pieces. He's going to be, like, your sixth hitter at best if you're in a good lineup.
For the Giants, that's certainly an upgrade from what they had.
It is absolutely.
And he's back with Bob Melvin again, and maybe I think they're maybe hoping those vibes and that tutelage comes back, and
which is a good point. It
becomes a better player.
But it's the same thing with Jorge Soler too. Jorge Soler had his best years with Brant Brown in Miami.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have Brant Brown anymore. They'll let him DH regularly, which is good for him. He does not hit as well when he's playing the field.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a world where Matt Chapman just doesn't have the bat anymore. Jorge Soler strikeout numbers go back up, and he's still hitting home runs, but he's not as valuable as he was in Miami.
And they're just a middling offensive team.
Yeah, you're just
again.
stuck sitting there. You're stuck sitting there with Young-Hoo Lee hitting 295, 300, and getting left on base every day.
Yep.
It makes you wonder. I am really low on the Giants this year. And then
so what about Padres? Do you feel differently about the Padres?
I feel a little better about the Padres. I think the Padres had too many cooks and the chefs in the kitchen last year a little bit, and it kind of played out that way in their end of season kind of moratorium that got posted in The Athletic. They're obviously not as talented of a team as they are this year. I think they did a good job in adding more depth to the bullpen.
Sure.
Although it's unproven depth, I think it has more depth, and I don't think they have to rely on a finicky Josh Hader to come in and kind of save them in late games. And I think, most importantly, they can reasonably rely on a better season from Manny Machado, and I think they can expect Bogarts to have another good year.
They'll get Tatis for a full year, theoretically.
That's a big one. The full year of Tatis, with no drama around him and the ability to just go out and play, I think will be a big deal. And if they get the star that is Tatis, that's undoubtedly makes them better than they were last year on its own, essentially.
Okay.
If you've got a 30-40, 30-30 Fernando Tatis back, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
And they've kind of figured out this whole shortstop situation. They have a real defender, hopefully, in Jackson Merrill in center field.
They have an entire team made of former shortstops, current or former shortstops.
They're somehow making
Profar, my A's legend Profar.
But
Profar.
settled roles and having Ha-Seong Kim, their best defender, actually playing shortstop. I think roles are better addressed this year, and I think they still have the pitching, especially in the rotation.
Sure.
Did they lose a lot of guys from last year's team? Yeah, but
still have Darvish, still have Musgrove.
Darvish, Musgrove, and now you've traded for Dylan Cease. So we'll see what happens with him this year. But they still have a lot of talent on the team, and I think kind of getting their teeth kicked in and put through the ringer a little bit could have done a lot to refocus the guys coming into this year, and just having to find leadership in the clubhouse with a new coach.
Yeah, Mike Schilt coming in.
Schilt coming in. Having that new coach and being able to define who's the top dog, who's responsible, who's the leader in this clubhouse, all the things that you don't see on the field but happen in the locker room, I think could go a long way to help the Padres this year. And that doesn't mean they'll be, neck and neck with the Dodgers, but I think it means that their season won't implode from day one.
More competitive. Yeah, I mean they're going to have to avoid all of that drama they had last season. I think that really derailed things for them more than just their play on the field. I think that exacerbated it, certainly. And I talked to my friend Ryan Cohen about this. He's a big Padre fan, and I think he feels the same. So I just wanted to talk about the NL West. Sorry, Rockies fans. I don't really know anybody out there that's a Rockies fan, but it's a tough time.
You guys extended Ezekiel Tovar. That was cool. We speak your name.
Tough time. You had you still have Chris Bryant, I guess. But yeah, the NL West is going to be really fun division to watch. I think it's going to be the best division in baseball. So I think that's setting up, especially if you're a West Coast baseball fan, it's going to be an exciting year. Should we flip it to the AL West? Because,
let's go to the AL
and I'm going to apologize to, I don't know if I want to apologize, but I'm saying just for time's sake, I want to stick to the West Coast because we're a West Coast podcast, and we're not going to go through every division. I know we're in Chicago. People like the Cubs out here. White Sox, I guess, there's not much hope for them to be good. But I want to stick on the West Coast because you are a Mariners fan. So give me the state of the Mariners. I want to talk about the A's as well. We know that the Astros and the Rangers have this awesome rivalry that's really, came to a head in the postseason. They're going to be really good, I think, again this season. But tell me about the Seattle Mariners because I think they're a fascinating third team that could compete, maybe
They
steal a playoff bid from
They
somebody
are.
this
They
year.
are.
How do you feel about them?
The Mariners had a really interesting offseason. The 54% comments from President of Baseball Ops Jerry DiPoto in the post end of season presser were put up pretty much everywhere. And the big problem with what he said is he didn't lie. Like, he told actually the truth, which I really actually appreciated, but a lot of people did not like. And he kind of said what no one around the league is saying, which is the playoffs are a crapshoot. Our goal over a 10-year period is to win enough that we essentially get into the playoffs every year and roll the dice and see what happens. Now, when you tell fans that you're trying to win 54% of your games, and which averages out to like a slightly above average, like fans don't want to hear that you're trying to be like good and not great.
Okay.
Fans want to see you go in and really go for it and go in and be exciting and bring in the big splash. So obviously that did not play well, and then you compound that with the first moves they make in the offseason are sending off Gino Suarez for a bullpen prospect who's got good stuff but can't throw a strike to save his life, and a backup catcher who can't hit to save his life. And it's like, well, what the heck are you doing here? And then they send, I don't even know if I'd call him a fan favorite. I would call him a fan debacle in Jared Kelenic. For essentially nothing. They trade him for Cole Phillips and Jackson Coar, who both are out with Tommy John surgery now. Jeez. So they got essentially nothing.
Sent to Atlanta, right?
To Atlanta.
Yeah. Okay.
And with Jared Kelenic, they sent Marco Gonzalez and Evan White, which kind of revealed the story that, oh, here we go, the Mariners are salary dumping. And we traded like what we thought was going to be a cornerstone of our franchise for salary relief. Like, you have got to be kidding me. And this was coming off a year where it felt like if maybe the Mariners would have added at the deadline, they could have made a push.
They were close.
They missed the playoffs by one game.
Yeah, very close.
So, and you'd think Paul Sewell could have helped with winning that one extra game.
Yeah.
So, rightfully so, there was a lot of angst from Mariners fans throughout the offseason, a lot of anger. And then it kind of trickled out that, like, oh, they're salary dumping because ownership, who had promised that, like, when we hit this competitive window that we're in right now was going to be willing to up the budget and spend, had told them that they were going to be able to spend this offseason and then pulled the rug on them. And so blame from the fan base kind of got finally shifted onto ownership.
It's always the owners.
And then the front office starts to make some moves. They traded Jose Caballero, who Mariners fans didn't expect to be on the team last year, for a promising outfielder in Luke Raley, and then they go and add Jorge Polanco. They sign Mitch Garver on a very reasonable $12 million deal.
Yeah, both players that are vets that can help you out.
Like,
proven,
good veterans, which has been something that I think the Mariners, you look at the last couple of seasons, and it's like, well, we tried to make it work with this under-the-radar guy who wasn't a proven vet, and it didn't work, and it cost us 10 games. And it's like, what would happen if the Mariners were built with a team full of, like, guaranteed professional baseball players? And that's kind of what we're getting this year. And on top of Polanco and Garver, then they go out and they add Gregory Santos from the White Sox to the bullpen to add yet another insanely high velocity, high stuff reliever to an already great, filthy bullpen.
Awesome.
And then once the Coar injury comes out, they actually go and sign Ryan Stanek for a reasonable, like, I think it was $6 million deal.
Okay.
So on paper, you love what the Mariners did.
All right.
The Mariners improved the most out of anyone in the AL West this offseason.
Whoa. All right. Yeah.
The Astros lost a lot of guys and only added Josh Hader, which we're not ignoring is a big addition.
Yeah.
And the Rangers lost a lot of pitching, and a lot of their pitching is going to be on the injured list for most of the year.
Yep.
They are bringing up Wyatt Langford, who scares the dickens out of me. But I think if you're a betting man, the Mariners to win the West at like plus 300 is one of the best division bets out there, because this is a team
to take. I like it.
That I think after years of having one of the best pitching staffs in baseball between the rotation and the bullpen, has continued to be failed by the offense and kind of keep them from being like good to great.
Sure.
Now you come in and it's like we have the same pitching staff. We actually improved the bullpen on what it's been over the last couple of years. But now you have an offense that has a real second baseman, has a real DH. The DH spot for the Mariners was the worst in the league by far last year. So you have a guy who batted 4th, 5th in the World Series championship roster for the Rangers and your everyday DH now.
Yeah. Who was DHing for them last year?
Oh, my God. It was a dumpster fire collection of guys. It was like Tommy LaStella to start the year, who got like 1 hit, was batting sub 100. A's legend, Tommy LaStella. Mike Ford got called up for AAA, was probably their best producer for a while, but like, it was a collection of nobodies.
Okay. I was curious. Yeah, because I don't even remember who was DHing for them, I guess, so that makes sense.
For a good reason, yeah. And they tried to bring in Colton Wong last year, and he just crashed and burned from day one. So you had like 3 or 4 black holes on the roster for most of the year.
Yep.
And then they went out and filled those with like proven MLB quality players. And I think the Mariners offense won't be like one of the best in the league or great, but like it won't suck.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of all they've needed over the last couple of years. So I genuinely think, and there's probably some bias here, but I genuinely think you're looking at like a 92 to 95 win Mariners team if everything goes right, which wins you the AL West and a spot in the ALDS. So I'm starting to see kind of the dark horse Mariners pick come up from a lot of industry experts, and I'm hoping it can stay under the radar as long as possible because there's a very real chance. And they brought in Brant Brown from the Marlins, who basically got brought in to be the quote-unquote offensive coordinator, which was essentially saying, like, this is how you hit with the bases loaded. like, and if the Mariners can put together good situational hitting and scrap together, like, one more run a game, they probably win, like, 10 more games.
Situational hitting, I think it's such a lost part of the game at this stage, because, I mean, I watched some bad teams play baseball, but last year I was watching teams and just felt like every time I watched they wouldn't change their approach with people on base, and they couldn't get hits when they really needed the moment. So I think getting a guy who could squeeze those extra runs out of a team, I think it's a great point that they could really make a difference.
Yeah, and and you're right. You saw it so many times. It'd be like second and third, 2 outs, and a guy's taking a home run swing on a slider 6 inches outside the zone. It's like,
just put it in play.
Doing
just put it in play.
Right. So I think it's going to be a really big season for the Mariners.
Yeah.
I'm keeping my hopes high.
Good. I'm glad. I like this. I like the optimism.
Yeah.
I don't think you're too far off, because I do see that the Mariners, obviously they were in the playoffs 2 years ago, and that was like a big deal for the city. I mean, getting back there, and I think they have a good core group of players, and I think that they've improved. I don't think it's crazy to say that they could win the division. I don't think they'll win the division. I think the Astros and the Rangers are still really good teams, and I think over the course of the season they'll probably be better. But I can certainly see a world where the Mariners sneak in there for that, maybe that top wild card spot, because I think they could very mumuch compete for it.
Yeah.
AL East still be tough, because they'll have some good teams too, maybe competing for that. But I can see it.
And before we get to the rest of the AL West, if you're a fan who doesn't care about the AL West or doesn't care about any of these teams, start tuning in. Because
sell us on it.
Like, the Astros-Rangers rivalry really got sold in the playoffs last year, and like now that's kind of like the fun one.
Yeah.
But like, the Mariners are really in that rivalry too. The Mariners, Astros, and Rangers have all been kind of the top 3. I mean, the Angels are always scary, quote unquote, but like we saw how the Shohei Trout experiment went over the years.
Yeah.
It's kind of known within the league that the Mariners, Astros, and Rangers all despise each other.
We need more of that in baseball.
We do. It's maybe the most heated like rivalry between the 3 teams in baseball right now. And if you like, I think there's been a fight between the Mariners and Astros each of the last 4 seasons. Like, they genuinely do not like each other. And then the Rangers kind of came out of nowhere in a sense last year and started like chipping back and forth with the Mariners and Astros as well. So that kind of 3-way race at the top of that division is probably going to be the most interesting one in baseball this year.
I agree. I'm excited to watch it, just as a, another former, I guess, current fan of an AL West team that might be leaving soon. No, it was fun to watch that right, because I watched a lot of the regular season games, just catching them, flipping through channels, and I just noticed how much Talking about the Rangers and the Astros specifically because they were the top teams of that division, and then getting to see that in the playoffs was really awesome, and the passion that those players played with. It was just cool to see, and have Bruce Bochy there, and you had Dusty Baker, who's obviously not there anymore. But it was just it felt like what baseball needed for a little bit of time.
Right, and every time like these three teams specifically match up with each other, like everyone on the field is well aware that like these are probably the games that are going to decide the division. So every time you get playoff intensity in those games, and they're always really fun and good to watch.
Love it. Looking forward to that. Let's talk about the A's just a little bit briefly here. I just want to say, I think people have heard me talk about this team and how frustrated and how terrible it's been. Apparently, they're not even opening the parking lots early enough for people to go in and protest and fulfill their patriotic duties of civil disobedience against John Fisher and his cronies. So shame on the A's for doing that. And I hope everybody there at the Coliseum is still able to do that regardless. The A's will not be a good team this year, and I know that. But I'm excited because they have some players who I genuinely like. And I think that were genuinely fun to watch toward the tail end of last season when they pulled Zach Geloff up. Brent Rooker hit a ton of home runs last season. They had this guy named Mason Miller who just throws gas. And they just got, Langoliers. He wasn't great last season, but he's one of those young guys that just a cool prospect at catcher and maybe can develop. So I don't know. And I love Mark Kotsay. I think he's the right man for this job. It's the hardest job in baseball. To have your front office and an ownership that's just totally against winning and doing anything in that respect, and he's just taken it on the chin and been a professional about it. So shout out to Kotsay and the guys that the A's have. So it might be fun just watching without any. Not that I had any expectations last year of winning anything, but I think it's fun for me. I'm just like, I'm not really going to be a fan of this team when they move to Vegas because I think that's still going to happen. But I'm excited to watch them regardless. So what do you think?
They're going to be a lot more fun this year. I think my best take on the A's, because I think you're right. I think going to Vegas, even if they don't go to Vegas, I think they're going to leave somewhere.
Yeah.
I think if the A's end up in Vegas, they have to change the team name to the Las Vegas Poachers.
Yes.
Because Las Vegas has stolen every sport. Like, they're not even doing, like, expansion drafts.
Outside of the hockey.
Outside of the hockey. I mean,
Knights,
they got the expansion team with the Golden Knights, but, like, they stole the Raiders, and now they're stealing the A's. Like, just change the name to the Las Vegas Poachers.
And I don't even blame the city of Las Vegas, because I don't think that they haven't really been, like, a lot of people haven't really on board for it. Maybe the Raiders are a different discussion, but with the A's, at least, it just feels like there's not really a ton of energy, and they do want a baseball team. I get that, and I want them to have a baseball team. I think it's a good city to have it, but to take a historic team like the A's, where there's still so much fan interest, and the fans that love this team, and the people in the Bay Area, that's still a really growing and diverse and solid market for baseball, to take them over there, it feels criminal. So
it does, and especially with the A's, like, that's a very, very historic, like, core MLB team, and to see them go is really a bummer, because it's not like, I hate to say it this way, but it's not like you took the Mariners, who had, like, done nothing and, like, came in 1977. Like, you took, like, a very historic franchise and are kind of ruined it to begin with, and then took it out of the city for a city who's already lost so much in terms of sports in the last couple of years. So it really sucks, and I don't think you're going to find anyone that's supporting what's happening there, which is at least good to see. But I do think if you're an A's fan, like, there is fun to be had without expectations this year. Zach Geloff is awesome. He's going to be fun to watch. Brent Rooker is awesome.
Yeah.
He's active on Twitter and really easy to be a fan of.
He's a good Twitter follow. Brent Rooker, shout out.
Brent Rooker's a great Twitter follow. Mason Miller, they're probably going to move. He's probably going to end up being the closer, but they've already moved him to a relief role. Yeah. I really wish he didn't get hurt last season, because he is electric to watch. He's a guy who doesn't touch 100, he sits at 100 with a really good sweeper. Like, just an awesome player to watch, and a really fun one to watch come in at the end of games, regardless of what the score is. Yeah. But then you can kind of run down the list of, like, young players that it's fun to watch play. You've got Lawrence Butler's going to be fun. Yep. Tyler Soderson's going to be fun. You touched on Langoliers and some other guys, but, like, there are, like, fun players, at least, to get behind with this team. And you guys have Nick Allen, and he's kind
Yeah.
of fun to watch.
I call him a little leprechaun because he's so
He's the
small.
being.
He's Irish. He hit a few home runs against the Giants last year, and all of my Giants fans were like, "How the hell
does
is
he
this
do
guy
this?
hitting even home runs? How does he even get the ball to the outfield to begin with? Because he's a small guy." But shout out Nick Allen, he's hilarious. A really good defensive player in the interior there in the middle of the infield. But yeah, this year it just feels like, because the last couple of years when they're kind of shelling everything out, from the core that they had with Chapman and Olsen and Simeon and Sean Murphy, players I still love to watch. Very happy for Marcus Simeon getting a World Series ring. He's awesome. He's from the Bay Area. He's a San Francisco guy. But when they were making that transition, the A's do the classic thing when they bring in really old, washed-up vets on, not cheap contracts, but like to show that maybe they spend a little money, but they really aren't. They're just using it as an excuse. So it's just depressing to watch that team where there's no real direction for it. Now, of course, when they're going to leave, they feel like they finally have gotten to that point where they have these prospects coming in. They have these young players who, pitching is going to be crazy because they have Ross Stripling, who's literally a home run derby pitching anytime he comes out. Yeah, so maybe he'll be better, but he was just awful to watch with the Giants last year. And they have, they got Alex Wood over, who is a good arm for the Giants, but he's not, anything special. I think they have a couple guys that can be good in that rotation, and maybe, maybe Blackburn rediscovers some of that all-star kind of caliber pitching that he's had. But so the pitching's not going to be great. I know they're going to give up a ton of runs, but I'm hoping they score enough runs to keep things competitive, which I think they will. Even with Esteury Ruiz running around the bases there too.
Yeah, and like it's so much easier to like feel something when you're watching them. When like you can be down 8 and like cheer for Lawrence Butler to hit a home run or like have a good personal season. Like there's still storylines stuff to follow this year, and you're exactly right. Like last year, it was very clear that like they were tanking and didn't care to win, and like there was no one really to cheer for, like individual success for even. So
not really.
The A's, I don't think you'll be like laughably historically bad this year.
That's the goal, baby. That's the goal. Setting the bar high.
High expectations for last year in Oakland, but you feel for the guys also that just have to deal with playing for the team
in an empty stadium,
like in an empty stadium. I don't even think they're playing in Oakland. I think they're playing in like AAA stadiums this year.
So they are playing in Oakland still. They're playing in the Coliseum this year. Next year they don't, because the lease is up after this season. So right now it sounds like, I think if I had to get in my crystal ball from all the chatter I'm hearing, because I follow a lot of Sacramento people too in sports there, and I love Sacramento's sports town. Sounds like they might take the Rivercats Stadium there, and that might be their home stadium, which is just crazy to think that it's not even just like a transitional year. It's going to be a transitional several years when this happens. So to have a Major League Baseball team, and the Rivercats ballpark is a nice one, but it's still a minor league ballpark.
Right.
It's not your major league facility. So I don't understand how that's going to work and how that's going to be a long-term thing, and they're going to be home in Sacramento. I feel good for the people at Sacramento getting a chance to show their passion for an MLB team. They want to get an expansion franchise there, and I think they deserve one. But it's a weird situation there.
And just like how disheartening is it next year specifically? Like you are a young guy who's been grinding up through the minor leagues. And, like, you finally get called in the office, and it's like, you're going to the show, you're going to make your debut, and then, like, you just walk into another AAA stadium. Like, that sucks for a guy who's, like, hoping to have this really cool moment. It's like, oh, I've played here before.
It's depressing. It's depressing for the players. It's a bad look for baseball. Manfred, I will say it again, he's the worst commissioner in all of sports right now, which is saying a lot because there's some bad ones there. But, I mean, they are negotiating, I think, technically with the city of Oakland and the county of Alameda to extend their lease, which might happen. But, again, it's like it might be a worse outcome, maybe not for the players, but nobody's going to show up to any of the games still. So, like, they're going to be still playing in front of an empty stadium. At least in Sacramento, they'll at least get people to come and watch baseball there. So that seems to be what's going to happen. But, again, we'll see. We never know with the A's. So, okay, we've been talking a lot about baseball. Jesus Christ. Let's get to. I want to get some predictions from you specifically. Dark horse team. I think you might have mentioned some, but give me your best dark horse team for this season that maybe some people are talking about, but aren't up there with the ones that I think people are favoring to get to the postseason.
Yeah, I'm gonna Chicago fans. You'll get mentioned a little bit here.
Okay.
Looking at the NL Central, and here's where the Hezzy Hay comes in. I think the Reds are going to be your dark horse in the NL Central.
I was looking at them. I was thinking.
Because when you look at that division, like the Cubs improved kind of this offseason. Like I don't think it was as much as anyone was expecting. And then the Brewers got worse. And then you look over at the Reds and it's like, well, they got better. And they're built on this super young core that showed a lot of promise last year. It seems like the Reds have far and away the highest ceiling in that division, and it wouldn't shock me if you saw a developmental step from basically the whole roster, and suddenly the Reds are like not just a NL Central like playoff team, but like a legitimate playoff team that could have made it in other divisions.
Yeah.
So I really like the Reds. My one concern with the Reds is kind of the other side of the coin with the whole team developing is that the whole team could run into a sophomore slump. And then suddenly the Reds are not looking so hot. But I like what they have in the rotation. I think there's a possibility for Frankie Montas to bounce back. Maybe not be what he once was, but like be a serviceable number 3 pitcher.
He relies a lot on velocity, and when he lost it last year and it wasn't there, he struggled. So if he gets it back, I can see him getting back to maybe being that way.
And there's reports that it's coming back a little bit. It probably will never be what it was, but
He's
you
legend.
can get serviceable work from Frankie Montas, and then obviously Hunter Green has potential to be special if he can dial in the walks a little bit. I really like Andrew Abbott. He got kind of shelled in the end of 2023 and in spring training as well, but I like what he showed last year. And then Nick Lodolo is coming back as well, and he is a super exciting, like Chris Sale-esque kind of long lefty that could by the end of the season be back in the rotation. There's a lot of good things that you see with the Reds, and Elly De La Cruz, as we all know, the star power he has. The bat still has a lot of question marks, but the thing with him and the thing that happens in kind of sports everywhere is like he can just impact the game in so many ways. Like he steals second and third and then steals home last season. Like if you've got a guy that's putting that kind of pressure on an opposing defense and team, like it can help the rest of the team even when maybe he's not having the best season at the plate. So I like what the Reds have. Really sucks seeing Noel be getting popped for PEDs, but it did kind of solve their logjam in the infield a little bit. So you like seeing everyone kind of figuring out their roles, and I think you could see a really big season from the Reds in the NL Central in their kind of team sophomore development year.
I like that pick. It's a division very much in flux still. I mean, I think people will expect the Cubs to lead it because it felt like they made enough moves. It felt like they brought enough people back to be competitive, and they missed the playoffs very narrowly as well. But I wouldn't be surprised to see the Reds right up there competing for it because they do have a lot of young, exciting prospects. Edwin Encarnacion Strand, one of my guys I like to watch too. So shout out Cincinnati. I had a Detroit Tigers. I like what the Detroit Tigers are building.
Tigers on my list too.
They still have Javi Baez, who we don't understand what's happening with him, but they have some really exciting guys. Mark Canha, A's legend. I think he's a really good piece in the outfield there. But they were second in AL Central last season, and AL Central was terrible. But for them to compete the way they did last year, and then put together the kind of rotation they have Kenta Maeda, they have Skubal, who's a really exciting younger
Skubal's
pitcher.
Back and he's looking really good this preseason.
Flaherty, they got Flaherty from the Cardinals, who has known to be a really solid pro as well. So, and I like Veerling a lot. I like Veerling as a young player as well. So that they have some guys I really like. I feel like they can be again competitive in a division that's the Centrals are just. You never know who's going to come up.
It's such a bad division. But what's interesting about the Tigers, like you said, like you can kind of see the pieces of a rotation there. Skubal, it's concerning because he's coming off a serious arm injury, but he's looked outstanding in what we've seen since being like cleared to pitch again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know Tigers fans have hopes for a Skubal Cy Young this year, and I don't think that's out of the question.
But even if they don't even get a Cy Young,
you don't need that. Like, he can still be your front line number one as long as he stays healthy. And then, you have Maeda, who's kind of your like grizzled vet, who
Yep.
like probably brings a lot of stability to that rotation if he can stay healthy. Flaherty's a little interesting. Like we've seen him be ace potential. We've also seen him be terrible.
Yeah.
If they can even him out a little bit, like that's a nice 3. And then you've got 2 big question marks in Casey Mize and Jackson Jobe.
Yep.
And Jackson Jobe is the really interesting one. Casey Mize, we'll see what happens. That is so far looked to be a really unfortunate high draft selection for the Tigers, but there's still potential there. Jackson Jobe isn't going to break camp with the team, but that's a guy who is essentially Paul Skeens, does everything Paul Skeens can do, but no one's talking about him. He's
not dating Libby Dunn.
Yeah, right. It's all about the lady. But he's not getting talked about that much, and he's someone who could come up midway through the season if he performs well, and probably is going to start in Double-A this year. If he performs well in the minors, I don't see why they wouldn't bring him up, and that's someone who could come out and kind of have that Cole Reagans breakout immediately on the roster. And so you look at the rotation, you say, oh, there's potential for this actually to be a pretty good rotation this year. And then you flip over to the offensive side, and it's like, could we see the breakout from Spencer Torkelson this year?
Yeah.
If you do, that's a huge bonus.
Yeah.
And then they've got a lot of guys where it's like, oh, I see like the potential there. Riley Green, if he can stay healthy, can be a really good player. Matt Vierling, you talked about. Avi Baez will always be a problem, but at least he can play defense.
Yeah.
But then they added Cole Keith and Parker Meadows. And if you have 2 guys that can come up and perform as rookies, like, oh, now you suddenly have a pretty deep lineup. The pitching staff is starting to look better. I can kind of see this coming together for Detroit. Do I think it's going to happen this year? Probably not.
Yeah.
You're asking for a lot of things to go right. But I think 2025 is a year that Detroit can circle and be like, we really should be a reliably competitive team, which for a fan base that hasn't seen a lot of good baseball in a while is really exciting. So I do like the Tigers as a pick, and especially with how wide open the AL Central is. The Twins are good, but they weren't a powerhouse last year by any stretch of the word. So the door's kind of open for anyone to sneak in there. If I had to take my pick, I'd probably still take the Twins, but the Tigers are kind of that dark horse waiting in the wings.
That's fair, because I just don't know if I trust the Twins that much to continue that, you know. Who knows? They still have some really good players. And
but it's hard to trust the Twins still. Like, it's definitely difficult.
Shout out to the good people of Detroit. Love you. Love my fam there. Hopefully get to see some good baseball coming up for you. But quickly, because we're going a little long here, but I just got me thinking about which team has the bleakest future. And I know there's a couple candidates that, for me at least, looking at. I mean, the A's, you could say them, but there's such a transition. They're trying to go to another city. So I feel like it's just like they're kind of this outlier, and they have a fan base or an ownership that's actively trying to tank the team. Who do you feel outside of there's a number of franchises out there that I feel like just in a bad place, and who do you feel like has it the worst?
Yeah, I honestly think it's one team and it's not close. I'll run through some of the candidates. You talked about the A's a little bit, but the A's, at least like we talked about earlier, they have a really fun, like slowly developing core that can be interesting to watch. Like you at least have hope there. The Royals just extended Bobby Witt. Cole Reagans broke out.
They have a couple guys.
They have some guys, and you can kind of see it starting to come together. Vinny Pasquantino's awesome.
Yeah. Why is Salvi Perez still playing baseball for them? It's crazy.
Oh, I mean,
I love Salvi. I love Salvi.
Out there.
He's a beast, but it's sad. It's sad to watch him play now.
He's old and slow. But you see the hope for the Royals. You see how it can improve a little bit. The Nationals, the talent's not quite up on the field yet, but Josiah Gray's cool.
I'm actually high on the Nationals a little bit. I think they're going to be
Mackenzie Gore is
more
fun.
competitive.
They have some guys there already, and then James Wood was on a tear this spring training, and then Dylan Cruz came in, and Dylan Cruz feels as close to a lock to be a contributing Major League Baseball player as it can get. So there's hope for the Nationals. The Cardinals are essentially a pitcher or two away from being back to being a real contender. Yeah. They really tried but didn't address that this offseason, but if Matthew Liberatore can kind of develop a little bit, Tink Hence is coming up. You see the offensive roster is great, but when they finally figure out pitching, and they're probably 2 real starting pitchers away from being back.
Sure.
So you're not worried about them.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the Cardinals are one of those franchises where I don't feel like I'm ever going to say that they're like in a bad spot because they're always they're just like they're a baseball town. They're going to keep rebuilding.
Exactly. And then the Guardians, it seemed bleak last year, but Chase DeLauder's kind of making a name for himself. They've got some guys who it's like, oh, well.
Still got Bieber. They still got
Bieber.
Yeah.
They still have Tristan McKenzie. They still have Josh Naylor.
That's Jose Ramirez.
Jose Ramirez, obviously. Yeah. But that's a team where it's like, okay, like they're essentially a few impact outfielders away from like being good again. So you don't worry about them so much. The Red Sox are scary. I did just kind of click with them in mind. They could maybe there's two teams.
Yeah, sure.
The Red Sox, you're in a scary spot where ownership essentially comes out and says, like, we just don't want to spend on the team anymore, even though we're the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So they're a little scary, but I think far and away the number one bleakest team right now is the Los Angeles Angels.
Yeah, it was on my list.
Shohei Ohtani left, and the copium you see from fans going there is crazy. They sold the farm at the deadline for a bunch of mid last year that busted within weeks.
Yeah, they kind of panicked. I feel like they did. They just didn't know what was happening, so they did something, and they just didn't.
Art said you can't trade Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah. Well,
so
they knew that, yeah, but I don't know. They tried desperately to like, hey, we can still be competitive. Please stay, right?
Please stay. Exactly. So, and that blew up in their face. So they have no farm, like zero farm system.
Yeah.
They have Shanwell and Neto. Reed Detmers is a little interesting, but I don't see ace written all over Reed Detmers. Mike Trout is a ghost of himself.
Yeah.
And will not be himself again for the rest of his career.
He's got like just chronic injury now.
Chronic injury, like chronic bad back problems. Like, as sad as it is, Mike Trout is not Mike Trout anymore. Yeah. You have Anthony Rendon on the worst
doesn't even like baseball.
In baseball. Blatantly saying he doesn't like baseball. And here's the thing, like, I get the defense for Anthony Rendon when it's like, well, guess what? A lot of guys view it the same way as Rendon does. Yeah. And that's fine. The thing with Rendon that makes it different, like, other guys, like, still rehab and come back from injury. Like, Rendon, like, just says, I'm going to be out and, like, take a vacation because I got this injury. And, like, other guys still, like, speak with the media. Like, the thing Rendon did, I think it was Sam Blum. It might have been someone else.
Yeah.
Last year where he goes up and starts asking him questions and he just goes, no habla inglés today. And it's like, dude, like, I can understand this not being a priority for you, but you have to, like, show up as a professional still. Yeah. Like, he's not even doing that.
Yeah.
And then, again, you come back to zero farm system to speak of. And an ownership group that, like, you could have thrown a parade if they sold last year, but he didn't in the last minute. Like, an ownership group that's going to get you nowhere. And again, like, you have Neto and Shanwell and Ohapi.
Yeah. Canning was Griffin Canning. You put him in there, yeah.
But, like, again, like, I don't see star.
Yeah.
In any of those guys. Maybe Ohapi I do, but I don't see star in any of those guys. Like, it looks so bleak. And, like, I don't think Taylor Ward's going to come back. Like, Taylor Ward had his face obliterated last year. Like, that is hard just pure mentally, let alone physically, to come back from. Like, I don't think you're going to get to see that same breakout Taylor Ward. Mm-hmm. It couldn't. There's no bleaker team than the Angels. Like, the Red Sox are at least, like, even without ownership support, like, you still have, like, a good front office that knows what they're doing. And, like, you extended Brian Bayo. Like, you have Rafi Devers. Like, there's some stuff there. Like, the Angels have nothing at all. And no hope for the future either. Like, they are going to be bad for a very long time. And that's one where, as a Mariners fan, like, I do not like the Angels, but, like, you got to feel bad for Angels fans on that one because they lose Shohei. And like you said, they panic and blow up the entire farm system to try to keep him, and it doesn't work. There's no sadder, bleaker team in baseball than the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim.
You heard it here, Angels fans. We're sorry. The one thing that did give me solace is that whole Shohei, Mike Trout era, that the A's had more playoff appearances, and always seemed to be like at least on par competitive with the Angels were, and it just and just for Angels fans to talk all that when all that was happening, it just as an A's fan, it gives me a little bit of pride just knowing that. Sorry, you aren't that good of a team.
The Seattle Mariners were in the midst of the longest playoff drought in the history of Big Four American sports.
Yep.
During the time that it was Shohei and Mike Trout, and they made more playoff appearances than the Angels did. Like,
It's crazy. It's crazy.
you have to be at rock bottom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're gonna look back in this period and for all the talent that the Angels had for that long and for the lack of success they have. It's just outstanding. It's astounding. It's insane. So
The tungsten armor Doyle tweet is going to live
evergreen
forever.
Evergreen.
And like every day it seems like, and this was a while ago, but every day it seems like something comes out that just makes you feel horrible as an Angels fan. Like, did you see? I can't remember who did it, but someone did a tweet that was like recapping the Oops All Pitchers draft for the Angels. They're all gone. And it was like 3 years ago. Like, they're all either out of baseball or like on a different team, and it's
insane.
It's not good.
Insane how incompetent that whole franchise has been just over this stretch. Getting like a generational player just gifted to you just because he was able to pitch and hit, and it was the best team to do it. And then getting, they also had a generational player already with Mike Trout.
They had the best player of all time and then added the best player of all time.
And they couldn't figure it out. So very sad, and now they'll be sad for a while. Okay. Let's end on maybe a happier note for other people, but I want to get your bold predictions for this 2024 MLB season, Connor, because I hope that I have like a few written down. One's kind of real, but one's kind of fake. But I want you to start.
Absolutely, I have two for you.
Please.
So the first one is Juan Soto is your AL MVP.
Ooh. All right.
You can book that now. I think I got him at plus 600. If he
Nice.
hits 35 home runs and the Yankees are okay,
Yeah.
he's going to win the AL MVP.
It is the Yankee effect. Yeah, I can see that.
It's without a doubt. And especially in a year where the AL is so wide open for the MVP, I think your top three are Juan Soto, Julio, and Adley.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think both Adley and Julio would have to have such tremendous seasons to outweigh, like, first year in New York, like Juan Soto, New York Yankee.
Yeah.
For a group of baseball writers that loves Juan Soto for good reason, loves Juan Soto as much as they do, like, they will be so happy to give him an MVP award if he does, like, just enough to justify it that, like, I don't know how you could pick anyone else. But the catch is Juan Soto will win MVP and the Yankees will miss the playoffs.
I like it.
Yankees fans, I'm talking to you. Your team is not good. Your rotation that you keep saying is the best in baseball is not good.
Garrett Cole's going to be out for a few months.
Garrett Cole's going to be out for a few months. Carlos Rodon lost every ounce of talent he had when he shaved his mustache coming to that buttoned-up team. He's going to be hurt at some point this year, and he's probably not going to be that good when he's healthy. Nestor Cortez, your opening day starter, has had one good season, and we saw the comeback and the regression last season. I don't expect him to pitch to 2.7 or whatever it was in 22 again. You have nothing.
Hey,
Aaron Judge is going.
He put out a really cool hype video.
He did put out a hype video, and he's going to be on. Is it Bluey? I think he's going to be. No, he's going to be on Paw Patrol. So you can watch Aaron Judge on Paw Patrol when he's injured on the injured list with his now chronic toe issue. You have a guy with a chronic toe issue playing center field, and you think he's going to stay healthy all year. DJ LeMahieu is old. Anthony Rizzo, who I love, is old and might be able to bounce back, but is still old. Volpe might be good. I'll give you that one. He might be good. But, like, I just look around the team, and it's like the over-under is 93.5 wins. Who looked at this roster and said they can win 93.5 games? Jason Dominguez, who you are going to need this season, is on the 60-day. They are not good. And this is the unpopular opinion hill I will die on. And I definitely have a lot of anti-Yankees bias, but, like,
we'll cut that out. We don't need to include that.
I keep looking at the roster, and I keep seeing question marks and guys that are clearly going to get injured and miss time, and a team that doesn't have a lot of depth to replace them. And I don't understand how we keep penciling the Yankees in to make the playoffs.
I'm gonna put this segment up on TikTok to make sure the Yankees.
Let them know.
There's gonna be a lot of mad Yankees fans just in the mentions.
Bring
and
them
just
to my
going
mentions.
crazy.
I'm willing to fight this one. Like, nothing about them makes me excited.
Love it. And you got the other one?
The other one is both World Series teams missed the playoffs.
Oh.
I think
wow.
The Diamondbacks end up in a spot. My tune might be changing a little bit. I talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
My tune might be changing now that they have like a 4 deep pitching, like 5 deep even pitching staff. But I think it's a situation for the Diamondbacks where a couple things don't break their way this year, and they just miss out by like a game or two, especially with like the Padres likely not to implode again this year, the Dodgers being even better, and although I'm down on them, like the Giants being like more competitive of a team.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a very unfortunate situation where the Diamondbacks miss the playoffs. Because in baseball, like, you don't see a lot of repeat playoff appearances, especially from small market teams. So that's one I have circled as not making the playoffs. And then the Rangers, most of the pitching staff is going to be hurt. They lost Jordan Montgomery. The bullpen did not bite them in the playoffs. But it was one of the worst bullpens
they were
in
very
baseball
shaky,
last year, and they haven't made a lot of improvements to it.
That was the most surprising thing of them going all the way and winning because just the way the bullpen was.
I kept waiting for them to get like hosed by Leclerc. Like I was waiting for Leclerc to implode in the playoffs, and he just never did. Which credit to him, credit to the player for doing that. But like, you also had like Travis Jankowski and Leody Taveras and Ezekiel Duran putting up like 120 WRC plus or higher seasons, and it's like I can understand Corey Seager and Marcus Semien being like MVP candidate quality players. What I can't understand is like every fringe guy and margin guy hitting like all-stars for the entirety of a season for them last year. So losing some of the pitching, I'm pretty confident saying Max Scherzer is closer to wash than he is his prime. Jacob deGrom, you don't know what you're going to get out of this season when he does come back.
No idea.
I don't see... The bullpen isn't drastically improved, like I said. Wyatt Langford and Evan Carter scare me because that could fix like the whole Leody Taveras and everyone else like imploding this year problem. But I don't see the Rangers being the same team they were last year because the Rangers were so good last year because they had this incredible like first 3-4 months of the season. Yeah. And then they imploded a little bit down the stretch and nearly lost.
Yeah.
They did lose the division to the Astros, but they nearly lost their playoff spot to the Mariners.
Yeah.
I don't see like the same type of like offensive magic this year for the Rangers.
They all just like regrouped at the same time, and they all just had it. They all had just an insane postseason run, and that's what baseball's about. It's just having everybody play
getting
well
hot
and
at the right
getting
time,
that
which I
postseason.
totally get. And that's not to say the World Series run was fraudulent or anything like that. Like
you just don't think maybe there's a regression to the mean.
I think there's
a little bit.
Big regression to the mean.
Okay,
like, they had guys who had no business being all-star caliber hitters.
Yeah.
All hitting at all-star caliber levels all at the same time for 4 months.
Yeah.
And like I was pulling my hair out as Mariners fans because it's like they can't keep getting away with this. Like this cannot keep happening. And eventually, again, they came back to the mean, and they came back to the mean hard.
Fair.
But I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be a couple games out of the playoffs, and it'll be kind of a disappointment to them. But at the same time, like, can you really be that disappointed when you won the World Series last year? So like,
good point.
Those are my 2 hot takes.
I like it.
Those are my 2 big ones.
Love it. The one I have, quickly before we wrap this up, the Baltimore Orioles will be in the World Series. This is my take. And I don't think it's super hot because I think a lot of people are high on the Orioles this year. But I just love what they put together. Hopefully they have a little more injury luck in the back end of the rotation and then back into the bullpen because I think that really bit them in the ass last year. But they have a super exciting offensive product. I think they have enough starting pitching and a lot of young guys that can go a lot of deep into ball games. So I feel like they can put it together. Again, what we said, maybe an AL that's a little down, from the past that, especially in the star, department, I think it's just a little more vulnerable. The Astros are older. Like you said, maybe you're not super high on the Rangers. The AL Central is really bad. I feel like this might be their year to do it.
No, it definitely could be. I mean, they've had some injuries to the starting rotation, which scares you a little bit early on. you really wish Felix Bautista was not out all year. That's really, truly a bummer because he's just a fun player to watch. And then the only thing that scares me about the Orioles is kind of the same thing as the Reds, where it's like, is the entire core of their team going to run into this sophomore slump? And if it does, like, it might get ugly for a little while. But I've said it in passing conversation with friends, like, the league should be terrified of the Baltimore Orioles, especially with a new ownership group. Like, if the new ownership group is willing to spend, like, you're looking at like a 10-year, like, very, very good window for them. The Orioles are scary. I would love nothing more than to see the Mariners and the Orioles matched up in the ALCS and just get the Astros out of there, get the Yankees out of there, get the Red Sox
we need somebody
out of
new.
We need new,
somebody new.
Fun franchises, and that's why it was so fun to see the Diamondbacks win last year.
It's refreshing.
But
I think they'll be in it. I think they'll be in it.
I think they'll be in it.
It's just a feeling for me. And then the one other I had, John Fisher goes bankrupt, and he's forced to sell the team, and everything comes up big.
Love that.
Bold prediction. The Gap stock just goes in the shitter, and
that
he's
would
got
be
to
so
sell.
nice. That would be so nice. That would be the win that all baseball fans are cheering for right there.
It's more wishful thinking than anything, I guess. Connor, this has been great. Do you want to wrap up with your favorite sports memory? It could be from your playing days. It could be from watching sports. I like to any new guests that I have on it. This is the question I love to ask to end the interview.
I think the best one was the 2022 AL Wild Card. Mariners break the postseason drought, and my dad and I took a red eye from Seattle. Well, I'm from Oregon. We took a flight to Seattle, took a red eye from Seattle to New York, went New York, Buffalo, Buffalo, Toronto. And so we got into Toronto like 6 hours before Game 2 of that Wild Card series against the Blue Jays. And this was the biggest playoff comeback or wild card comeback in MLB history that we were there for, when the Mariners came back from like 8-1 or something. And we're in left field, surrounded by Blue Jays fans. I've got my Julio jersey on, and everyone's like talking at me. We're getting smoked all game. And then it starts in the 6th or 7th inning, and they just slowly chip their way back, and then they end up pulling off the upset.
Yeah, that comeback was crazy.
It feels really good to wave goodbye to fans that have been chirping you all game when they blow it. So that was a really good one, and I've got a picture of it still. It's like me and my dad on ESPN. I've got like those stupid little Mariners Believe signs in my hand. It's score bug at the top. It's like 8-1. My dad looks like stunned and confused, and I look depressed. And then right from there, it flips, and we pull off the win and advance to the AL DS, which went really poorly. But we don't talk about that.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about it.
But yeah, that was a really cool one. And then we flew back the next day and
awesome.
Got to do the whole thing. So M's fans travel. When we do win, we don't win often, but when we win, we travel.
Shout out Mariners, shout out Seattle. You got to do it in Canada too, and just those fans are passionate, so I'm sure they're giving you a good amount of chirping.
We took on a country.
Fought a war. Yeah, no, that I remember that. I think I caught the end of that game when the comeback was starting, and just how insane that was for them to do that.
It was unbelievable, and like the big like breakthrough was when Bichette and Springer collided in the infield, and like that sucks to see. Like you don't like seeing guys injured, but like it puts you in such an awkward spot as a fan when like you're sitting there like trying to like scream and cheer and go crazy.
They're like wailing in pain.
Like George Springer is like writhing in pain on the ground, and like Blue Jays fans are like, oh no, like disaster has struck, and we're like going crazy, and then we looked down, we're like, oh, he's injured. Like, oh fuck. So
that's a great one.
That's a funny one, and that was a good time. That's probably the best sports memory I think I ever had.
Hell yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it. It's been really great having you on,
Thanks
Connor.
for having me on. I've always loved talking ball, and I think it's going to be a really good, exciting 2024 season. I think there's a lot to look forward to this year.
Check in. It's going to be exciting. Appreciate you bringing on your knowledge, sharing to the fans. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.